Hello, and welcome to our channel, where we explore some of the most fascinating anomalies from the SCP Foundation database. Today, we're diving into SCP-3288, also known as the Aristocrats. Some SCPs in the Foundation's database were created through unethical or dangerous experimentation. This is a reminder that there can be serious consequences when people pursue scientific progress without considering the ethical implications. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the origins of SCP-3288, its anomalous properties, and the efforts being made to contain and study this dangerous anomaly. So sit back, relax, and prepare to enter the strange and fascinating world of SCP-3288. But before we begin, I want to issue a content warning. SCP-3288 contains themes of extreme violence and other disturbing content. As such, this video may not be suitable for all audiences. We urge viewers who may be sensitive to these topics to exercise caution and discretion when watching this video. Viewer discretion is advised. Item Number SCP-3288. Object Class Keter. Special Containment Procedures. An SCP-3288 population no less than 20 nor greater than 30 individuals is to be maintained at Humanoid Containment Site 282. Each SCP-3288 must be contained within individual containment units. Behavioral studies that require SCP-3288 to SCP-3288 contact are to be conducted with the utmost caution. SCP-3288 are to be terminated where encountered and disposed of per hazardous waste protocols. It is imperative that SCP-3288 infestations undergo thorough destruction or containment, as a single uncontained instance of SCP-3288 has the potential to trigger an SK-class dominance shift scenario within the next century, if not sooner. Description: SCP-3288 designates a highly predatory species, or subspecies of the genus Homo anthropophagus. SCP-3288 display a number of abnormal characteristics and behaviors that distinguish them from the baseline species. The most common deviations include acute hyperdontia and macrodontia. An instance of SCP-3288 has teeth approximately 6 times the size of normal adult teeth, with more than 60 teeth unevenly distributed over 6 distinct rows, requiring jaws much larger than that of baseline humans. Gross mandibular prognathism. Fluctuating facial asymmetry. Allochastanomelia of the arms. An instance of SCP-3288 commonly has arms more than twice the length of a baseline human of similar height. Arachnodactyly and polydactyly. Kyphosis. Abnormal muscle strength despite having the appearance of severe emaciation. Albinism. Superior low-light vision and heterochromia iridum. The eyes are notably reflective, and their colors range from blue, red, purple, and yellow. A reliance on both bipedal and quadrupedal locomotion. Abnormally rapid physical growth and development. This results in a 2 to 3 week gestation period, with sexual maturity being reached within 16 to 20 months. Gottschall-Gartner syndrome, primarily manifesting on the hands and fingers. Alopecia universalis. Acute photophobia, meaning direct exposure to sunlight will result in both physical and psychological damage. Mental instability. This is primarily characterized by delusions of grandeur and malignant narcissism. An addiction to human flesh that takes on biological and psychological components. These abnormalities are primarily the result of excessive inbreeding, but without the increased chance for certain recessive or deleterious traits, especially those related to infertility, higher infant and child mortality, and loss of immune function. These detrimental traits have not been only negated but inversely amplified, resulting in longer lifespans, increased resistance to disease and anomalously high levels of fertility. The Foundation became aware of SCP-3288 while investigating reports of unexplained disappearances in Vienna. It was discovered that these incidents occurred in close proximity to sewer holes and access tunnels and primarily targeted the most vulnerable of the population, such as prostitutes, unsupervised children, transients, and inebriated or otherwise indisposed individuals. Agents Cyril Novik and Diana Fisher were dispatched to Vienna in order to determine whether or not a number of unexplained disappearances were of an anomalous nature. Interviews with law enforcement and government officials revealed that human remains belonging to 3 individuals had been recovered, but that this information was not released to the public due to concerns of causing further panic. These remains were promptly confiscated and delivered to Humanoid Containment Site 282 in Graz. Autopsies were performed by Dr. Felix Gartner, who noted that the remains displayed no injuries corresponding with a human attacker, and compared the deceased to victims of hyena attacks. Dr. Gartner concluded that all sustained injuries were caused by a mix of teeth, claws, and raw physical strength. Bite marks were found to coincide with human teeth despite their abnormal size. Approximately 6 times the size of normal adult teeth, and more than 60 teeth unevenly distributed over 6 distinct rows, requiring jaws much larger than that of baseline humans. Further analysis revealed unique patterns among the bite marks, suggesting that there existed more than one source. The entities responsible for these deaths were classified as anomalous and received the SCP-3288 designation. Mobile Task Force Sigma-6, also known as Helsingers, was ordered to patrol the Leopoldstadt district while incognito, the district having seen the highest number of recorded disappearances. Operatives are instructed to target SCP-3288 with tracking darts, and to refrain from lethal force. Field Logs. Field Log 1. June 10, 1988. 12 MTF Sigma-6 operatives patrolled the Leopoldstadt district at 18:00 hours, while 10 maintained watch at positions with unrestricted views of known sewers, holes, and access tunnels. At 21 hours, operatives Sigma-6-12 and Sigma-6-9 reported hearing a muffled scream near the Donau Canal 15 and sought to investigate the matter while requesting backup. Support arrived 3 minutes after the initial request and found the mangled remains of both operatives as well as the half-consumed body of a local civilian. The decapitated body of Sigma-6-12 was pulled from the Donau Canal. Although the head was never located, his neck had sustained injuries suggesting that it had been severed or destroyed by a single bite. A trail of blood and entrails led to Sigma-6-9, who had been torn in half along the waist. He had successfully crawled into an alleyway before succumbing to his injuries. The mission was deemed a success despite the loss of life, as Sigma-6-9 had successfully struck the SCP-3288 instance with a tracking dart, achieving the mission's primary objective. The entity had escaped into the sewers, its movements tracked until the signal began to fade before entirely disappearing somewhere below the Hofburg 16. Due to the progressively declining nature of the signal, it is believed that the device had been brought far deeper than even the Viennese sewers should have accommodated. Field Log 2, July 10, 1988. Constructed in the mid-19th century, the Viennese sewers are part of a larger network of subterranean tunnels that include catacombs, abandoned wine cellars, and underground rivers. MTF Sigma-6 operatives were divided into 4 teams of 5, 3 teams to investigate the sewers, and 1 to remain on standby. By triangulating on the last known location of the tracked SCP-3288, the Foundation hoped to minimize the possibility of escape and public exposure. For this mission, while it is preferable that operatives secure and contain the threat, lethal force may be used at their discretion. At 900, MTF Sigma-6 operatives reached their destination without incident but initially failed to discover anything of significance. After several hours of investigation, Sigma-6-4 encountered human skeletal remains while wading through waist-deep water. Closer analysis of this area uncovered a number of loose bricks whose removal revealed an unrecorded subterranean chamber whose walls were engraved with the House of Habsburg's coat of arms. The chamber included 24 sarcophagi, and was presumably a family crypt belonging to the House of Habsburg despite there existing no records of its creation. The statues primarily depict women wearing veils over their eyes with a single finger held to their lips. The tombs, though intricate and reflective of their status, lacked any indication as to who may have been interred within. Prying open the sarcophagi revealed the skeletal remains of over 300 infants, all displaying severe and likely fatal deformities. The original entrance had been evidently destroyed, the stairs shattered and buried in soil. At the far end of the crypt was a vault door composed of bronze with no apparent means of access, and seemingly impenetrable without proper equipment. The door displayed the House of Habsburg's coat of arms and was engraved with the words Ad Puritatem Sanguinis, meaning in English, for purity of blood. MTF Sigma-6 operatives were ordered to hold their current location and await the arrival of an infiltration team. Foundation agents organized the temporary evacuation of the Hofburg and the sealing of all sewer access points throughout the city. Field Log 3, August 10, 1988. MTF Sigma-6 maintained shifts throughout the night, making repeated attempts to open the vault door. At 12:00 hours, the surface had been fully evacuated and an infiltration team had arrived at MTF Sigma-6's position. The bronze gate was carved apart via oxy-fuel cutting torches over an approximately 2-hour period, bypassing intricate mechanisms and revealing a spiral staircase. An 8-person squad descended the staircase, with radio transmission growing increasingly faint as the operatives traveled an estimated 65 meters underground. Each operative equipped with an M16 rifle with attached flashlight, heavy tactical armor, and helmet-mounted live audio-video recording devices. Red ground flares were periodically lit and discarded, providing a clear path of return. Operatives reached the bottom of the stairwell, where the gray stone halls of the crypt were replaced by masterfully crafted marble floors, carpets, and white-painted walls and ceilings. The large chamber was found to be architecturally identical to the Swiss wing of Hofburg Palace, closely resembling 18th century depictions and reflecting the late Baroque, early Rococo artistic style popular during the era. The location contained various sculptures and Corinthian columns, while paintings and tattered tapestries adorned its walls. All depictions of the human form had been literally defaced, regardless of artistic medium. Operatives described the air as having an odor not dissimilar to rotten meat and stale sweat. The floor and walls were discolored with what appeared to be blood, most of the stains appearing to be exceptionally old. Traveling through a southeast corridor, operatives entered what appeared to be SCP-32881's equivalent of the Hofburg's Imperial Library. One notable difference between this section of SCP-32881 and Hofburg Palace is the presence of a working 18th century laboratory. Sigma-6-7, the only member of the acting squad to be fluent in both German and Latin, discovered documents involving alchemy, biology, and the occult. A decorative writing desk and accompanying throne were located at the far end of the chamber. The desk contained documents relating to transactions, contracts, and private journals. These documents, along with those relating to the occult sciences, were gathered and delivered to Field Command. Operatives reached the ballroom and opera hall, describing the air as especially fetid. The aroma of perfume was also noted, though its presence did little to disguise the smell of decay. The area contained a number of instruments, a standing harp, harpsichord, violins, etc., all of which displayed evidence of recent use. There were several refectory tables located through the chamber. The ballroom evidently used as a dining hall as well. Atop the tables were human remains in various levels of decomposition and culinary presentation. A bell abruptly began to toll, and was followed by the automatic music of a nearby pipe organ. The discordant song played for approximately 3 minutes. When the pipe organ ceased its playing, it was followed by the sound of opening doors and an increasing number of shuffling footsteps. Operatives were ordered to find a hidden and defensible position and to deactivate their flashlights. 7 successfully hid behind the curtains of the Opera Hall, but Sigma 618 fell behind, having tripped over a pile of bones and forced to take cover behind a harpsichord. Sigma 61 was able to observe the entire ballroom without obstruction from the far corner of the stage curtain. The ballroom's wide gates opened as video revealed the dim light of lanterns swaying in the hands of their shambling carriers. Closer analysis would show that these figures were dressed in the garb of 18th century courtiers. They are followed by others wearing increasingly extravagant, if ragged, attire. All outfits appeared to contain different shades of red, deeply contrasting with their chalk-white skin, porcelain masquerade masks, and powdered wigs. A pair of diminutive SCP-3288 entered, lagging behind the others. One blew a rusty trumpet while the other acted as standard bearer, holding a crudely painted ensign depicting a red lion on a black field. The trumpeter appeared to make an announcement, the words unintelligible due to the guttural nature of their speech. The trumpeter and standard bearer quickly moved aside, their stunted legs causing them to tumble and roll as they fled. There now appeared to be several hundred SCP-3288 throughout the ballroom. Sigma 61 activated a silent distress call, requesting heavy support. All SCP-3288 proceeded to kneel and lower their heads. An exceptionally corpulent instance of SCP-3288 entered the room, carried by other SCP-3288 via an enlarged and reinforced sedan chair. The morbidly obese individual, classified as SCP-3288-Alpha, was dressed in a patchwork of noble finery, stitched together from various fabrics to create a single outfit capable of fitting its frame. It wore a crown that had come to more closely resemble a torture device, too small for its head but held in place by an overgrowth of flesh. In lieu of a masquerade mask, it hid its face beneath a red shroud. A large iron cauldron was delivered to SCP-3288-Alpha's table, the container appearing to vibrate of its own accord. A dwarf SCP-3288 climbed atop SCP-3288-Alpha's shoulder, proceeding to lift its red veil, while leaving its eyes covered. A second diminutive specimen removed the cauldron's cover. SCP-3288-Alpha sniffed the air, then proceeded to lift the cauldron and pour its contents down its anomalously large mouth and gullet. Part of its meal wiggled free, revealing that the cauldron contained living infants displaying severe deformities. The other SCP-3288 raised their masks and began to feast with voracious enthusiasm. An exceptionally tall specimen approached the harpsichord and snatched Sigma 618 from behind it. It lifted him by his head but made no effort to alarm its fellow SCP-3288. Instead, the entity unhinged its jaw and quickly forced the operative down its throat feet first, his screams unheard among the sounds of feasting and discordant music. The gathering became orgiastic as the SCP-3288 turned to fornication and violence, making no distinction between the apparent age or sex of the participant. An explosion rocked the event, causing mass casualties among the SCP-3288. It is hypothesized that Sigma 618 survived his ordeal and was able to activate an explosive device, sacrificing himself in order to terminate or otherwise incapacitate a great number of hostile entities. Panic spread among the remaining SCP-3288. MTF Sigma-6 would exploit this opportunity and employed 3-methylfentanyl to render the SCP-3288 unconscious. With the arrival of reinforcements, the survivors were secured and contained at Humanoid Containment Site 282. The sheer size of SCP-3288-Alpha necessitated the use of a specialized crane, and the creation of a shaft directly connecting SCP-32881 to the surface. Following the removal of SCP-3288-Alpha, as well as all relevant documents and objects, SCP-32881 was filled with cement and reburied. SCP-3288-Alpha Interview Log October 10, 1988. The following is a summarized interview between SCP-3288-Alpha and Dr. Tobias Moser. The interview takes place at a containment site after the reburial of the SCP-3288-1. Forward. Despite its corpulent morbidity and lack of mobility, subject is considered dangerous and to be approached with the utmost caution. Subject is blind and incapable of reading or writing, the interior of its hollow sockets pushed outward to the point of prolapse. Subject is fluent in Austrian German, preferring to speak the Skonbrenner Deutsch, a sociolect spoken by the Imperial Habsburg family and the nobility of Austria-Hungary. Subject has been stripped nude, bound and muzzled, and equipped with electrodes in order to prevent hostilities and ensure cooperation. Begin interview. Dr. Tobias Moser greeted the subject and requested it to disclose its name. He made it clear that its cooperation was mandatory. In response, SCP-3288-Alpha spoke in a derogatory manner and referred to Dr. Moser as meat. The subject appeared agitated and struggled against the restraints, while also expressing his desire for the aroma of the Dr. Tobias Moser. Dr. Tobias Moser reiterated the importance of the subject's cooperation and activated the electrodes, causing the subject to react physically. SCP-3288-Alpha expressed confusion and disbelief that what he called meat was capable of causing harm and disobeying his will. Dr. Tobias Moser insisted that the subject answer his questions and once again activated the electrodes. However, SCP-3288-Alpha appeared to be unfazed by the pain, and instead responded with threats of violence and aggression towards Dr. Moser and his family. The subject expressed a belief in the resilience of their blood and scoffed at the idea that Dr. Moser's methods could harm them. Dr. Tobias Moser turned to the security officer and requested that the subject be illuminated. He mentioned his difficulty seeing in the dim cells. The security officer complied by flashing a bright light with approximately 32,000 lumens at the subject. The sudden illumination caused SCP-3288-Alpha to scream and convulse, and the subject finally yielded and begged for mercy. Dr. Tobias Moser instructed the security officer to stop and made a note of the subject's extreme photophobia. He then proceeded to ask for the subject's name. SCP-3288-Alpha provided a grandiose and exaggerated response, introducing themselves as the Emperor of Austria and the head of the House of Habsburg, Emperor Maximilian the Great. The subject attempted to bow in a courtly manner before acknowledging Dr. Moser's superiority and submission to him. It then made a vulgar suggestion that Dr. Moser may wish to consume its flesh or engage in other violent acts with it. Dr. Tobias Moser was taken aback by SCP-3288-Alpha's vulgar suggestion and vehemently declined. He then took a deep breath to regain his composure before continuing to question the subject. Dr. Moser asked whether the subject had been born blind or if they had lost their vision accidentally. SCP-3288-Alpha redirected the conversation, insisting on Dr. Moser revealing his name as well. The subject also commented on Dr. Moser's foreign accent despite his fluency in German. Dr. Tobias Moser replied to the subject's request, introducing himself as King Tobias Moser of the Foundation. SCP-3288-Alpha appeared to be in awe of Dr. Tobias Moser's title, referring to him as a king and acknowledging his perceived nobility. The subject also recounted their earlier speculation that Dr. Moser may have been a duke but admitted that he had proven himself far stronger than that. SCP-3288 Alpha proceeded to mention its knowledge of the Foundation, and referred to it as the Foundation. The subject also joked about its loss of vision, saying that his royal true-seeing eyes were too big for his stomach while hosting a banquet. The creature seemed to find the situation amusing. SCP-3288 Alpha continued to recount the incident that led to its blindness, revealing that it had been warned about the size of the meal but had insisted on eating it whole due to their status as Emperor. The subject proclaimed their desire to devour everything and seemed to relish in its past display of dominance. SCP-3288 Alpha went on to describe the gruesome details of their loss of vision, revealing that their eyes had burst from their sockets due to the large meal they had consumed. The subject seemed to take pleasure in the recollection, laughing, and dismissing the loss of its eyes as unimportant. Dr. Tobias Moser gave his full attention to SCP-3288 Alpha as the subject completed its story. After listening carefully, he acknowledged the subject's words by stating, "I see. Well, that was quite a story." Dr. Moser then proceeded to inquire about the subject's court and the House of Habsburg. "We are of the same noble blood," the subject replied, its left hand resting over its stomach. The subject continued, "But some are more noble than others. Our bloodline is pure, untainted by outsiders." Dr. Tobias Moser posed a question to SCP-3288 Alpha, asking why they consumed humans. In response, SCP-3288 Alpha denied eating humans, and instead stated that they consumed peasants and undesirables, those considered to be unworthy of life. They declared that this was the nature of nobility, and questioned the purpose of existence, if not to consume such beings. The doctor's expression darkened as he listened to the subject's rationale. Dr. Tobias Moser acknowledged SCP-3288 Alpha's statement, and expressed his intention to depart, indicating that they would converse again in the near future. SCP-3288 Alpha responded affirmatively, addressing Dr. Tobias Moser as King Moser, and insinuating their desire to consume him, expressing pleasure in anticipation of savoring his flavor. The doctor left the room, feeling uneasy, and disturbed by SCP-3288 Alpha's behavior and remarks. This was the end of the first interview with the subject. Afterwards, thanks to this interview, we may be able to glean more information by playing to the creature's delusions, but it is difficult to say how much of what it is saying is true. However, DNA analysis has revealed that SCP-3288 Alpha does in fact descend from the House of Habsburg, and this so far appears to be true for all SCP-3288. Also, a number of significant documents were recovered from SCP-32881, allowing the Foundation to develop a better understanding of SCP-3288. The following excerpts have been translated from their original German and are arranged in chronological order. Footnotes have been provided in order to frame these documents within their historical and cultural context. Excerpts from the Journal of Leopold I. Leopold I was the Holy Roman Emperor as well as the King of Hungary, Croatia, and Bohemia. Generally regarded as an intellectual, he was known for his interest in astronomy, alchemy, and the early sciences. 10th of November, 1700. And with the death of Charles, so dies our noble line in Iberia. I will restore our rightful place. My claim is valid and will not be denied. I already hear the intoxicating drums of war. But his disease, his curse, concerns me greatly. Despite the purity of our blood, untainted for generations, Charles was a sickly creature with the mind of a child. I too was a sickly youth, but my mind remains sharp. I must make use of this blessing before my dynasty succumbs to madness and cretinism. Note about Charles II of Spain. Charles was physically and mentally disabled and infertile, possibly due to this massive inbreeding. Due to the deaths of his half-brothers, he was the last member of the male Spanish Habsburg line. The physician who performed his autopsy stated that his body did not contain a single drop of blood. His heart was the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines rotten, and gangrenous. He had a single testicle, black as coal, and his head was full of water. 4th of August, 1701. The Jesuits have exhausted their usefulness. Against my better judgment, I have chosen to seek out those with knowledge of the so-called abominable sciences, scholars of the forbidden mysteries, both great and terrible. And I have found someone who knows the dark, a woman of rare, almost beguiling beauty. She is older than she appears, for she speaks with the experience of 100 lifetimes on subjects I had only just begun to grasp. She is a creature of the wild, a living embodiment of all that is pagan. I am a stranger in her world, and I am afraid. 22nd of October, 1701. She says she will teach me, but for a price she will name upon the completion of her tutelage. A strange request, but all she presently asks is that I uphold my end of the bargain. I have more power and wealth than any man alive. Payment will not be difficult. I will not allow our venerable house to fall. But my laboratory is ill-suited for such a task. I have hired workers to begin construction on a new site, something away from the prying eyes of sycophantic courtiers. 19th of December, 1701. My tutelage, though difficult, progresses well. A universal essence, the way of all flesh, it all begins to make sense. My eyes are now open and I see with such clarity. I will cleanse my family of this curse. The essence is malleable, subject to change. But one piece moves the other, resulting in an often unpredictable transmutation. My current experiments make use of the simplest of God's creations, rodents, and insects primarily. I have formed living things, creatures whose very visage would sunder even the most resolute of minds. 8th of February, 1702. Construction of the new laboratory goes well. I predict its completion within the next 3 months. Equipment has been delivered from Damascus. If there is one thing those Mohammedans know, it is the occult sciences. More often than not, my teacher leaves me to my own devices. She appears only at night, though I cannot say from where. She comes and goes as she pleases, my servant seemingly unaware of her presence. 27th of March, 1702. The new laboratory was finished ahead of schedule. The workers merely need to install my equipment, and I can take my experiments to the next tier. But fresh materials are required, and pests will no longer suffice. I am not yet willing to experiment on my own blood, but perhaps there is another way. The workers promised secrecy, but in my dreams I see betrayal. I have come too far to allow such an interference. If the church learns of this, it could ruin everything. These dreams are an omen, and I know they will consume me unless I take swift action. I know what must be done. 15th of April, 1702. My teacher is less understanding than I had expected, for even her heathen heart does not dissuade the disgust and contempt with which she now looks upon me. I did what I had to. For my family, for the purity of our blood, for the immortality of our chosen line. How could this witch understand my burden? She vows to return tomorrow for her payment. I would just have this over with. I am still a man of my word. 16th of April, 1702. I watched her burn. Her sorcery slew many of my guardsmen, but in the end she was detained and delivered to the church. The zealots, having heard my testimony, proved just as eager to see that wretched bitch be consigned to the flames. I know such methods have fallen out of fashion, thus we committed the act under the cover of darkness and secrecy. I would have granted her land or made her rich as Crassus, but no, that wicked creature sought to be clever. She said I could never save my family without her aid and demanded that I end my rule, destroy all titles, and deeds, delivering my land and wealth to the common folk. Did she really believe I would plunge my kingdoms, my empire, into anarchy? Truly, she was mad. But now nothing remains but ash and cinder, and I may return to my great work, no longer bound by her ethical inflexibility. There is so very much to be done. Later entries by Leopold I are increasingly frenzied and illegible, suggesting a deteriorating mental state until his death in 1705. It appears that he eventually had success, resulting in the creation of SCP-3288 via the introduction of an anomalous gene into the family bloodline. This gene allows human DNA to resist certain deleterious conditions associated with inbreeding. The House of Habsburg continued its practice of inbreeding, accelerating the development of mutations. Those with significant deformities were hidden from the public, the Habsburg monarchs eventually creating vast vaults to house them. The vault-dwelling Habsburgs continued to breed, eventually developing mutations which vastly increased their rate of reproduction, in turn increasing the chances of entirely new mutations. Those who more closely resembled baseline humans remained on the surface, while those sent below continued to adapt to subterranean life. DNA analysis has revealed that consanguinity grew increasingly more extreme over the years, further indicating that incest between parent and child or brother and sister had become the norm among SCP-3288 by the 19th century. It appears that the Habsburg monarchs went to great lengths to provide their vault-dwelling kin with a lifestyle just as extravagant as those above. Documents reveal the steady delivery of food, wine, and entertainment. Over time, these requests become eccentric and strange and eventually depraved. The documents show that among these requests were exotic animals for a menagerie, a barrel of fermented horse piss, and requests for fattened children and instruments of torture. All evidence suggests that these requests were met. It is unknown how long SCP-3288 have survived without outside assistance. One document appears to imply that the Great Plague of 1738 led to the delivery of a significant amount of feed. One document of singular importance contains a list of vaults similar to SCP-32881. The Foundation has used this information to locate and neutralize SCP-3288 hives, but the document itself has been the cause of concern, half of it illegible due to mold-related damage. This means that at least half of these vaults cannot be located and will continue to be a significant threat to the public. Addendum 09-23-2016. There are a growing number of reports describing violent sexual assaults and acts of cannibalism throughout Central Europe. Closer analysis of these attacks has led the Foundation to conclude that SCP-3288 are responsible for the violence. Due to the widespread nature of these incidents, it is feared that multiple undiscovered SCP-3288 vaults have been breached. An instance of SCP-3288 was recently captured at the Black Forest in Germany. Tracked to a derelict hunting lodge by MTF Sigma-6, the entity was successfully secured and contained with operatives suffering only minor casualties. 9 bound women were discovered in the basement, only one was still alive, and the cadavers displayed ruptured lower abdomens and evidence of partial cannibalization. Autopsies would reveal that the dead had been primarily consumed from within. The survivor was dirty, malnourished, and her lower abdomen was heavily swollen and visibly throbbing. The woman screamed to the operatives, pleading that they get these things out of her, along with various expletives and religious invocations. She received medical evacuation via helicopter, but crashed approximately 5 minutes into its flight. 4 fetuses were discovered among the wreckage, though heavily charred. All displayed mutations associated with SCP-3288. SCP-3288-6971, interview log on April 24, 2016. The recently captured instance of SCP-3288 classified as SCP-3288-6971 was interrogated. Interview was carried out by Dr. Elizabeth Varga. Forward. Subject is restrained and muzzled, and its cell is equipped for enhanced interrogation. Due to the severity of the circumstances, personnel are encouraged to use all possible means of information extraction. Interview conducted in German. Begin interview. Dr. Elizabeth Varga posed a question to SCP-32886971 regarding the presence of other victims and their location. SCP-32886971 reacted to the inquiry by emitting a chattering noise, and subsequently burst into laughter. Dr. Elizabeth Varga instructed the security officer to use a light source, as time was of the essence. The security officer complied and directed a beam of light with an approximate intensity of 32,000 lumens towards SCP-32886971. In response, SCP-32886971 emitted a loud shriek and verbally threatened Dr. Varga, using profanity, and suggesting violent actions towards her. Dr. Elizabeth Varga ordered for an increase in pressure or torture to be applied to SCP-32886971. In response to the directive, SCP-32886971 continued to emit a loud shriek while its bones began to break. Dr. Elizabeth Varga urged SCP-32886971 to reveal all the information it possessed. In response, SCP-32886971 surrendered, using the word parley to indicate a willingness to negotiate. Dr. Varga then prompted SCP-32886971 to share its knowledge by asking, "Tell me what you know." SCP-32886971 displayed physical signs of fear, such as trembling, before disclosing information regarding the vessels. It claimed to be only a duke and referred that they want an empress. Dr. Varga pressed SCP-32886971 to provide further details by asking, "Tell me about these vessels, now." SCP-32886971 declared their actions to be justified, claiming that they were merely asserting their ownership of the women based on the divine right of kings. Dr. Elizabeth Varga then redirected the conversation back to the subject of the women who were kidnapped. SCP-32886971 mentioned the involvement of an empress, and how they had allegedly maintained pure blood for 1,000 years, untouched by the taint of outsiders. Dr. Varga probed for the reason behind their recent change in behavior by asking, "Why change? Why now?" SCP-32886971 asserted that their blood is strong now. So strong, it overwhelms the blood of the wretched and mud-bound. Their lying will never die, it will never fade. It also made a disturbing threat to rape anyone in their path, and expressed that their blood lying is their gift and a blessing. Dr. Elizabeth Varga requested clarification on SCP-32886971's previous statement. SCP-32886971 responded cryptically, claiming that the weak will give rise to the strong, and the doomed will give rise to the chosen. SCP-32886971 elaborated on their beliefs, stating that the greedy will consume the charitable, the merciless will harm the peaceful, and the sexually promiscuous will violate the chaste. It claimed that they would make the world perfect by making everyone aristocrats in the end, and that their dynasty would never come to an end. This was the end of the interview. The SCP-3288 seems to stem in part from one person's fear of losing status and power. Leopold's transformation of its offspring into monsters is presented as a cautionary case about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the pursuit of power at any cost. This is a reminder that there can be serious consequences when people pursue scientific progress without considering the ethical implications. SCP-3288 is still uncontained, and the Foundation is doing everything to locate the source of this infestation. Stay safe out there, and when you are at it, subscribe to this channel for more SCP content.